That was a lot of talking for just switching between two different pages. But it is important, of course, to know how to work with the router. Now, however, I want to make sure that we can also click on a single post and still load that. Because right now, nothing is happening when we're doing that. We also don't get an error, but nothing is happening. The reason for this, of course, is that in our posts component, where we have this handler for handling a click on the post here, the post selected handler is setting some state which is irrelevant because I'm not handling the state anymore. I don't even set up a default here. Now, when clicking on this, I actually now want to load the full post. For this, we of course also need to determine where this full post should be shown. We could render it in the block component instead of our post here. We could load the full post in this place. This is one option. Here, however, or no matter where we use actually, we need to be able to get a dynamic routing parameter. Because if we have a look at our post's output, each post has an ID. And this ID, of course, is important because when we click on a post, we need to know which post that was, which post we want to load. And that doesn't change when we use different routes. Thankfully, we have a way of getting the ID. So now we need to pass that ID as part of the URL so that in the post component, the full post component, when we load it, we can get this parameter and load the appropriate post. For this, when defining the route, we need to inform React Router about the fact that we now have a dynamic element in this URL. Obviously, we will have posts with ID 1, 2, 3, and we won't hard code it like this. That would be a nightmare, and in 99.9% of the applications, you don't even know how many possible values you have here. So instead of hard coding the different IDs, we define a flexible, a variable route parameter with colon and then any name of your choice, like ID or post ID. I'll just choose ID because it's shorter. This will be replaced dynamically, or essentially it tells the React router, hey, whenever you have slash something, this route here is meant. So just colon ID. And yes, this will interfere with this route. I'll take care about this in a second by simply changing the positions because it's parsed from top to bottom. So new post is recognized first and this doesn't accidentally catch this because new post of course could be interpreted as an ID because all we're saying is we have something dynamic here. So that is a route parameter. Now, of course, we also want to make sure that we pass that parameter when clicking on a route now. For that, we need to handle a click on a single post in the posts component. And there would be two ways of doing that. The first is to simply wrap that post component we output here with a link. And that would be perfectly fine and maybe the default way you do it. So let me quickly do this. I'll import link in curly braces from React Router DOM. And I use link and not navlink because I don't plan on styling the active post, though of course you could do that. Now here I'll then wrap this post element here with this link component, just like that. And I'll wrap it in parentheses so that I can split this over multiple lines because that makes it a bit easier to read. So now we're essentially returning a link, and there we now have to set to something dynamic, and that dynamic should be our ID. Potentially, of course, if you have longer URLs where you have something like posts slash and then the ID, you might also mix a string and then your ID or whatever it is. Here, however, we're just handling slash and then directly the ID. So there is no string part in front of the ID. I just need to pass the ID itself. So I want to go to post ID here. That is essentially what I want to do. I want to navigate to this URL. And you can still add slash in front of it like this. So now with that, we're passing the post ID. let's now go back to the block component and make sure we load the post component when going to this route here. So for that, in the block component, I'll add an import of post from, and now that's in the full post component, full post JS. And therefore, maybe let's also name this full post here, and then let's load full post down there. Now we have the full post component. Let's now save all files and go back to the application and get that key error because obviously forgot this. In the posts component, when looping through all these elements, link is now the outer element in our array of elements here for posts. So that key property should now also be added to the link and not to the post. It always has to be on the outmost element in your loop. With that, however, we got rid of the error message. And now if I click on a post, you can actually see that there is the ID in the URL. And you see, please select the post here, which doesn't make too much sense anymore. It makes sense in one way though. We don't load the post successfully because this props ID in the full post component is not set anymore. It's not how we retrieve the parameter we're passing through the route URL. So this is not working. What is working though, we can confirm this in our application, is that we can click on posts and load different IDs. This is working. We're also loading the component. Now we just need to work on extracting that parameter though.